What up, Mets fans? It's your boy CP here, debuting my new Mets podcast episode, True Mets Talk with CP. I've done Mets content on the channel before, but this is the debut of the new logo and the new name. Thank you for rocking with me. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, comment your thoughts and opinions, and let's talk some offseason Mets baseball. All right, so let's get into it. Like I said, this is nothing new. I've done solo Mets content on my channel. This is just under a new name and logo. Wanted to give it a fresh start since we're heading into the off season, and this is not going to in any way affect the other great Mets shows that I'm doing alongside other great Mets content creators like Talking Mets with Rob and Mets Talk with Hayden on the Mets Roundtable podcast, as well as my good buddy. We've been doing Mets content for the last 6 months, ever since I started this YouTube channel, on the Interstate Mets Report, Mets post-game shows, all that good stuff is still going to be happening. Nelson from Orange Country Mets fan. I'll link all of their YouTubes down in the description as well. Check out my YouTube. I got all that up, and that's still going to be happening moving forward. So this is just my solo Mets content creation here under the new name. So thank you for rocking with me. As always, welcome to the show. I appreciate the support. Make sure you're also rocking with me on X and Instagram at CPNY Sports. My handle is at CPNY Sports all around. And you know where to find me on YouTube. Tell your friends, tell your family if they're Mets fans or MLB fans in general. Hit that thumbs up, support the podcast. Comment your thoughts and opinions with anything that I talk about today. I'd love to hear your thoughts as a Mets fan because this offseason is going to be a wild one. And as you're watching this video, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel in the bottom right-hand corner. As you're watching, don't even have to deviate away from the video. Now, let's get into it because I wanted to talk a little bit about this Mets offseason. I've been saying it on the Mets Roundtable. I've been saying it on the Interstate Mets Report. This Mets offseason is going to be one for the ages because there's just so many different routes that David Stearns and this Mets front office can take in terms of filling the glaring holes on this team before opening day. Now, what are those glaring holes? We'll go through it one by one. I'll talk about a little bit about the starting rotation, and then I'll talk about the relief market. Obviously, the bullpen needs some work. We'll talk about the DH situation and then the second base, third base situation. If you want, these thoughts are pretty much going to summarize what we said on Interstate Mets back yesterday with Nelson. So if you want to get Nelson's take on it as well, make sure you go ahead and watch the Interstate Mets Report. We just streamed it yesterday. Great turnout, great support. I appreciate that. If you're new here, though, these are going to be my takes on what the Mets need and how they can approach it. And there's no one size fits all answer because there's so many different ways. Like I said, David Stearns has the advantage in that this Mets offseason, you can go ahead and go about it so many different ways from so many different perspectives, whether it's free agency or the trade market. So let's get into it. The starting pitching here, obviously, like I said, I truly believe the Mets are going to go with a six-man rotation to open up this season. And that's just due to the fact that we'll talk about the free agent class or potential free agency class that's going to be coming in and who David Stearns can kind of sign to fill in these gaps. But you have Kodai Senga in year 2. You have an older Jose Quintana, and you have these guys at the bottom in Jose Butto and Tyler McGill, who, quite frankly, if you're a Mets fan, probably don't want to see out there for the large majority of the season. David Peterson went down, I think, with a labrum injury. He's going to be sidelined for the beginning of the season as well. And I think really Joey Lucchesi, once he came back into the picture last season off the injury, he performed pretty well. And I really do think if the Mets decide to go with the six-man rotation, Joey Lucchesi definitely deserves that. But who's going to be filling in these gaps? Kodai Senga, ace. He's got Cy Young votes. Obviously, he's probably not going to win the Cy Young award, but he's got Cy Young votes, and he definitely should get Rookie of the Year votes as well. I don't think he's going to win either. I'm not even sure. I don't really keep up with the awards, so I don't really know when those are going to be announced. But that's neither here nor there. He deserves to get votes because he had a tremendous rookie campaign, and he was one of the lone bright spots on this Mets roster for 2023. So Kodai Senga is going to be your ace. Who's going to be filling in for 2, 3, and that fifth spot? That's what we want to know. Jose Quintana had a pretty good, I guess, season once he came off of his injury in 2023. It wasn't going to blow you away and it wasn't spectacular, but I think he exceeded my personal expectations. And I'm definitely confident in him moving forward as that fourth slotted guy. And in this next slide, you'll see the free agent market. You'll see a potential trade market for starting pitchers. But what you won't see is the internal farm system that the Mets also have to choose from. Now, David Stearns, to preface this before we get into the next slide, David Stearns in an interview said that he doesn't foresee anybody from the farm system in terms of starting pitching being on the Mets opening day roster. Now, that doesn't rule out any sort of call-ups mid-season, and that doesn't rule out any call-ups if an injury were to happen. But in a perfect scenario, I think David Stearns really wants to keep those guys down there, get them that experience. And if worst case scenario arises where you need to fill a spot really badly and they're unable to do so this offseason, which is not going to happen, there's just a plethora of options. Um, then you can go ahead and call upon those guys. But I would not expect that coming out of spring training for the opening day roster. So let's get into it. Filling this rotation. Free agent market and trade market. Obviously, you have Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who we've all been speculating about. He is going to get posted this week. As you saw earlier in this clip, this is getting recorded on November 9th, and I believe Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Shota Imanga are going to be posted this week for teams to start calling his agent up and negotiating a contract with. Now, Yoshinobu Yamamoto is going to be highly sought after. The Yankees and the Mets seem to be, I guess, the top two from what I'm hearing. Andy Martino, as much as a lot of people don't like him, has been putting out some articles and some quotes about Yoshinobu Yamamoto, saying the Mets and Yankees are the front runners, with the Yankees having a little bit more advantage in terms of signing him. Now, we all knew that the Yankees were going to be on him. Brian Cashman was one of the first guys to go over to Japan and scout him. That is no surprise. But I will tell you right now, and this is my Mets fandom aside, this is my bias aside, that nobody in this league is going to outbid Steve Cohen on anybody. And yes, that includes Shohei Ohtani, who you don't see in here because he's not going to be pitching in 2024, unfortunately. So, like I said, if Steve Cohen wants him, he's going to get him. And that really does have to do with like a geographic restriction. Now, we don't know what any free agent's geographic preference is, whether it's the East Coast versus the West Coast, larger market versus smaller market. All of these things do effectively take or are in at play in terms of making a decision. But all things leading to the Yankees and Mets being the top front runners. And how great would it be to have Kodai Senga and Yoshinobu Yamamoto? Those two have definitely talked 1 and 2 in the rotation. Now, Shota Imanga is definitely someone who's been flying under the radar. It just came out recently within the last couple of days that he's set to be posted this week as well. He is a crafty left-hander, and I like what I see out of him. Now, there's something to be said for having the likes of Senga, Yamamoto, and Imanga in the same rotation in terms of having to sort of mitigate them and their innings limit, right? We saw Kodai Senga, the Mets go to a six-man rotation to give Kodai Senga an extra day off. If you have two guys and even Kodai Senga in his second season that need that sort of workaround for them to get accustomed and keep getting accustomed to the MLB style of every fifth day, then that does put some strain on the back end of your rotation. So that's why I'm saying first and foremost that even if it's only Yoshinobu Yamamoto that's going to be joining the Mets, and this is all speculatory, I want to preface that nothing is concrete, then it's going to be a six-man rotation at the very minimum. Now, if you go get Yamamoto and Imanga, you might have to go to a seven-man rotation. And I don't think that's feasible. So that's why I don't think the Mets will be in on both. But I think the consensus is 1A is Yamamoto, 1B is Imanga. Like I said, I do like lefty pitching. That's something that the Mets over the past couple years have definitely lacked. We know David Peterson. He hasn't come into fruition of what we expected. And now we have Quintana, who we saw only a limited time of last season. So keeping an eye out on Imanga and his market. I'm really curious in terms of who's going to end up with him because, like I said, I do like what I see out of him. He has a nice little changeup, and he's just a crafty left-hander. So that's going to be very interesting to see what his market is. Other candidates, Sonny Gray is getting up there in age. He's a nice little piece maybe for that three spot. Maybe if you want to flip him and Quintana, whatever, however you want to play that. But he's not going to make or break a starting rotation. He's just a nice little filler piece towards the mid end of that rotation. Eduardo Rodriguez is another guy that really does intrigue me. He is a perfect slot in for that three spot in the rotation, given let's just say that Yamamoto does get signed. You need at least one more guy from free agency or trade. I think Eduardo Rodriguez meets that criteria. Either Rodriguez or Montgomery, because these guys are both left-handers. You would have two left-handers in your rotation at that point. You'd go righty, righty, lefty, lefty, presumably with Senga, Yamamoto, either Rodriguez or Montgomery, and then Quintana. And then 5-6 would have to be a toss-up between maybe some internal fillings. So these guys on the left-hand side definitely do intrigue me. Now, another guy that I like out of this list, he's probably about the only other guy that I like out of this list, is definitely Tyler Mahle. I'm not going to get too much into him, but his sample size definitely does intrigue me. He is a free agent, and I would like the Mets to prioritize him at least over a Sonny Gray type guy. I will say that. Um, Martin Perez, Blake Snell, Luis Severino, Perez and Snell also being left-handed pitchers. Not sold on them. I know Blake Snell's coming off of a career season. I just don't see it. A lot of people speculating whether it's just a contract type season, gets his contract and then performs how he's performed over the last couple of years. I don't think he's been too impressive ever since he came to San Diego. But like I said, I don't scout, any Padres players that thoroughly. So, and Luis Severino, obviously, with the Carlos Mendoza hiring, which I will get into here in a little bit, is an interesting kind of take. A lot of people think that he could be good somewhere else and he needs a change of scenery outside of the Yankees. But I just don't see it happening with the Mets. But a lot of people like to have him and throw him in there in terms of speculation. Trade market's going to be interesting. Corbin Burns, how is that relationship with the Brewers and Mets after this whole David Stern situation went down? That remains to be seen. Corbin Burns is not going to be a Brewer for the foreseeable future. I can't see it happening, and I don't think he enjoys being shorted on his money and being taken to arbitration over a couple $1 million when he's been one of the best pitchers in the league, arguably top five for some time now. Dylan Cease, another guy who had a little bit of an off year last year, but definitely has the stuff to be a potential ace. If the Mets can swing a trade for Dylan Cease, I would love a Senga, Cease, Yamamoto 1, 2, 3 punch. I wouldn't even care about that fifth spot in the rotation. Let's go back to this graphic right here. If you give me Senga, Cease, Yamamoto, Quintana, I don't care who's in that number 5. You can put in Tyler McGill there at number 5. I don't care how you work it. Those top 3 are going to be absolutely lethal. Shane Bieber, another guy. I think he has some control left on his contract, so that makes things interesting in terms of a potential trade with the Guardians. The Guardians and Mets have swung deals in the past, so let's keep track of that relationship, especially with that Lindor deal, as we all know. And he is also a capable guy that can slot in at that third spot of the rotation as well. But my preference would definitely be out of any trade candidate, obviously outside of Burns. I think he's a little bit less likely, is Dylan Cease. And then you got Tyler Glass now, man. I know a lot of people don't want to kick the tires on him. I understand the injury history, but this guy is a premier pitcher when he is healthy, and that is the big if. And I think that a lot of Mets fans, including myself, are definitely turned off by this sort of experimental idea with the way that the whole Verlander and Scherzer situation played out. We want to get younger, we want to get healthier, and Tyler Glass now just doesn't embody that. So we'll see how the Mets decide to fill in their rotation, but there's a lot of options moving forward. What might be even more options, or maybe just equivalent, is filling this bullpen that definitely needs help. Edwin Diaz coming back is going to be huge. I believe that's exactly the start of when the Mets season derailed. It derailed even before it started, unfortunately. David Robertson got traded midway through the season. We all know he's a free agent coming up. We'll talk about it a little bit. Brooks Raley is going to be, he was not traded. Everybody was thinking that he might get traded at the trade deadline. The Mets decided to retain him. Very good idea in doing so. He's a crafty lefty as well out of the pen, and every team needs a crafty lefty out of the pen. He basically replaced Aaron Loop, who's also a free agent, shocking enough. But yeah, this bullpen really is not great. I mean, these are the guys after Adam Ottavino opted out of his player option. These are the guys that are available to the Mets right now on the roster moving forward internally. Drew Smith, not reliable. Drew Smith, I mean, he has a lively fastball. I get it. But how many times do we see him leave it over the heart of the plate and it get clobbered? It too much. You cannot trust him in any sort of big games. And the MLB is shifting in a way that you need dominant bullpen help up front. Starters don't go 5 innings. They don't go 6 innings like they used to anymore. We know that. We know that was an issue with the New York Mets in 2023. These early guys need to be able to hold it down until the big guns come in and Edwin Diaz is able to get the save. Sean Reed Foley, Trevor Gott, Drew Smith, Grant Hartwig, Stephen Nagosic, they're not going to cut it. Those guys aren't going to cut it. I'm really interested to see how David Stearns goes about this route because he has had great pitching and a great bullpen in his days in Milwaukee. He has created that foundation, or he had created that foundation over there. Is he able to do the same with the Mets? That's why they pay him the big bucks. Let's look at who can fill in for this bullpen. David Robertson could get brought back. Obviously, he signed that 1-year deal. He is now becoming a journeyman. He was with the Phillies. Now he's with the Mets. Went over to the Marlins, struggled heavily. He didn't look like the same David Robertson as he was in the Mets uniform. So maybe bringing him back to Queens, maybe revitalizes him a little bit. I don't know. I'd be open to trying it because they need a setup man really badly. You got other guys here. Craig Kimbrell, older guy, a little bit less reliable, I want to say, but certainly an option as well. Josh Hader is going to be the biggest, I guess, attraction on this free agent market and his services. Now, I said that I'd love a Josh Hader, Edwin Diaz 1-2 combo in whatever order that you want to put those guys in, but I don't think it's feasible to pay him what he's going to want. And I don't think it's going to be or go over well with the Mets fan base. Shout out Nelson. We did have this debate. Personally, if it means to get Hader here and move Edwin Diaz to set it man coming off the injury, I'd be for it. But I do understand the flip side of the argument that you don't take a man's job away, after such an injury and just the way he performed, obviously, the season beforehand. So we'll see what happens to Josh Hader, but it's going to be one of those moves where it's like as soon as he signs to another team, I'm going to be like, man, that's one that got away. But it is what it is. You got Liam Hendricks as well on the market. Want to see what his market's going to be like. Another guy that really is capable, energetic. I love his passion. Coming back from the cancer diagnosis as well. Just an all-around good clubhouse guy from what I'm hearing. Like I said, I'm not in tune with the White Sox or any of their players. They've had their fair share of issues, but Liam Hendricks is one of those guys. He's a true pro's pro. So he's on the market as well. Andrew Chafin, who Mets fans have wanted for so long, is also on the market. You got Jordan Hicks is really interesting because the guy can throw upwards of 103, I think he even threw, I think he hit 105 at one point, if I'm not mistaken. But the control issue is just there. I don't want a Miguel Castro 2.0. Everyone, every Mets fan and D-backs fan at this point with his postseason performances know the struggles of Miguel Castro. And I just don't want that to be 2.0 with the Jordan Hicks signing, because as much and as lively as a fastball can be in the MLB, if you can't locate it, doesn't really do anybody a whole lot of good. So Daniel Hudson, a reliever, or not a reliever, a veteran, excuse me. He's proven. Believe he won a championship on that 2019 Nationals roster. Coming from the Dodgers, we'll see what his market is. Aaron Loop. I don't think the Mets are going to want to retain two lefties in the pen, but you never know. Aaron Loop, and Aroldis Chapman are two lefties on the market. We'll see what happens. I really like this name Stanek here. Ryan Stanek, he throws gas. He was an integral piece of the Astros bullpen for quite some time, and he's a guy that I think out of anybody on this list is probably going to be the most realistic option for the New York Mets. So keep an eye out on Ryan Stanek. Fujinami, another interesting guy as well. Nelson from Amish Country Mets fan has been saying his name quite a lot. He's an interesting hard thrower. We'll see what happens with him. And Adam Ottavino, old friend. I can't see Adam Ottavino coming back. I just can't see it. He had a breakout season 2 seasons ago, and he just could not replicate that production last season. He just couldn't. And it's just frustrating with now these enhanced rules of base stealing. Adam Ottavino already wasn't a great pitcher to hold runners on. And when you're a reliever in tough spots and crucial spots, you need to be able to do that and control the run game. And I just can't stand watching Adam Ottavino just be mindless of these runners and keep on going with that same old leg kick. Like it just, I don't know. I just can't see it. Can't see it. I'm sorry. But we'll see where he ends up. I'm really surprised that he declined the player option as well. He's getting up there in age, so I'm not really sure what type of money he's going to be looking at, but I just can't see the Mets offering him anything of value. Um, David Bednar is an interesting name, and so is Devin Williams from the Brewers. We'll see what the Brewers do. They're kind of in a so-so situation. They just lost their GM and their manager, so I don't really know what's going to happen with the Brewers. That ownership seems to not know as well. Like, I don't think they have any idea what they're doing over there. So if they do decide to tear it all down and call it quits, Devin Williams is definitely a piece that you got to call in on 100%. That changeup is lethal. It's probably it's the best changeup in the league. It's airbending. It's crazy. It's like as crazy as the forkball. Like I watch him throw that changeup and I'm just mesmerized every time. I don't know how anybody hits it. Um, and then two guys on the right-hand side is trade market, Hunter Harvey and Kyle Finnegan. Listen, in-division trades are really hard. Obviously, they're with the Washington Nationals. Hunter Harvey's a flamethrower. Kyle Finnegan had a decent season last season. I think he was about mid-3 ERA. I think it's like 3.39, 3.29. Don't quote me on that. Both those guys I can definitely see being contributors on a contender. We'll see, like I said, we'll see how the Nationals play it too. They're in a weird situation as well. They're not going to be contenders, but I don't think that they're as far out as everyone thinks. I mean, the haul that they've gotten over the last couple of years by offloading the likes of Trey Turner, Juan Soto, Josh Bell, etc., has put them in a prime spot to keep competing and keep competing sooner than expected. So keep an eye on those two guys, Hunter Harvey and Kyle Finnegan, in the trade market. Um, Moving on, the second base and third base situation for the New York Mets is as open as ever. It's actually crazy that a team that expects to be contending, and this is not a knock because the Mets just have to figure this out. I think they will figure it out, but there's such a plethora of options of how you can fill these two spots. Obviously, the top two guys are probably going to get the bulk work at third base. Depends on who wins the job, though, because they are in direct competition with one another. And not only are they in direct competition with one another, excuse me, they are in direct competition now with Jet Williams, who is very fastly approaching the big leagues. And so what I mentioned at the top of this podcast episode is that David Stearns has all the versatility in the world that he can choose to deploy, but he has to make tough decisions all across the board, because not only do you have a current MLB roster that you have to mix and match positions with now. And you talk about Jeff McNeil, who I don't see Jeff McNeil playing a lot of games at second base. I think that if he's not a trade target, a trade candidate for this team, um, moving forward with how crowded this infield is, I think that he does move to the outfield and becomes that fourth outfielder type for the New York Mets. Um, so we'll see what happens here. But Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio, like I said, these guys too are not safe. Their jobs aren't safe. Brett Beatty hit 212 last season, only 9 home runs and over 300 at bats. That type of production is not going to win you an everyday starting job on a contending team. Ronnie Mauricio started off hot. I think he only notched 26 games with the Mets under his belt. 2 home runs, hit 248, OPS of like 623. He cooled off towards the end, but I like what Ronnie Mauricio has to offer. I like his strength. I like his bat speed. I like his power from the left-handed side. And I think he played a better third base than a lot of people thought he was going to play. Even a second base. He was great out in the field. I can't remember how many errors he actually committed, so I won't say a number off the top of my head, but he actually looked competent out there in the field, and that was one of his biggest knocks. So we'll see what happens there between those two guys. I fully expect one of those two to be the starting New York Mets third baseman come opening day. And we'll see what happens at second base. I think Jeff McNeil, like I said, I think he eventually transfers over to the outfield if he's not traded. And the whole Jeff McNeil trade scenario, I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to go into what I would like to see happen with Jeff McNeil because honestly, at the end of the day, I am a fan of Jeff McNeil. I would like to see him stay on the team because I know what he provides from the plate. He doesn't offer you power, but he offers you the ability to get on base. And I know he didn't do so as much this past season, but when he's at the top of his game and you slot him in towards the bottom of the lineup and he sees those fastballs, he can get on base for you. So I know everyone's enamored with power, but everyone on their team, I think if you make a contending team and you're to build one from scratch, every team needs a Jeff McNeil type player. I truly believe that because he also offers versatility in the field, not only in the infield, but the outfield as well. So, but Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, are two guys that are slowly rising, or I didn't say slowly rising. I'm sorry. They are fastly rising, and they are going to be in the major leagues sooner than not. So this is the interesting thing is that Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio really have, as young as they are, it's unfortunate because they have no time to sort of dilly-dally around. Like if those guys do not get it together, they are getting yanked, and these guys coming up, Luis Angel Acuna and Jet Williams, are going to be coming for those positions. Now, there's also a lot of talk about Jet Williams' potential in the outfield. He is a speedy guy. Maybe if you want to move Nimmo over to center or to left field, because left field will be in need, you can go ahead and try Jet Williams in the outfield. Same thing with Luis Angel Acuna. These infielders, it's easier to transform an infielder to an outfielder. I know from experience, I did both. I wasn't a great outfielder, so there's a lot of polishing that needs to be done. I know that for a fact with those two guys, but it is easier with the speed. So we'll see what happens with the Mets in terms of how they really do fill out the situation. Third base, second base, and left field. You have a revolving door of guys, and not to mention, you still have Mark Vientos. I think out of everybody on this list, Mark Vientos is probably going to be the first one to go. If I had to guess, it's unfortunate because I really do think that he is going to be a decent major league hitter, a DH presumably somewhere. I know he struggled with the inconsistent reps last season. Everybody was wondering why Buck Showalter wasn't playing him as much as everyone expected with the offense struggling. And it was really head scratching to me too. I said it on the Interstate Mets Report podcast numerous times. And it's just been something that was definitely a head scratcher, but he did turn it on. We saw a little spurt of Mark Vientos towards the end of the season, what he can truly provide. And I do think that he can hit the long ball at an efficient rate in the MLB. You will get the strikeouts. You will get that high strikeout rate like you do with Ronnie Mauricio, but the home runs will come. And then obviously you can't forget about Luis Guillorme, super utility man, probably the best defender. If not in the league, then definitely on the New York Mets, probably top 5 defender in the league with the glove. Doesn't offer you much with the bat, but I think that as long as you have a glove like Luis Guillorme does, you will find a home somewhere. So definitely expect him to be on the roster as well. I don't think the Mets are going to be parting with him or leaving him in the minor leagues. So that is interesting. And I just wanted to bring that, attention to that because, like I said, my whole main goal of making this podcast episode is that I want to just sort of um, bring to light how truly difficult of a job David Stearns does have in front of him. Like, it's a challenge for him. It's going to be a challenge. And he needs to hit the nail on the head because if he doesn't, the Mets fan base is going to be pissed off. Some of the young guys will get traded. Make no mistake about it. This is what happens when you have a plethora of young guys, only 9 positions to play, and you're trying to contend for a World Series in the next couple of years. They have to find the perfect mix between the young guys and some veteran presence. And that's really hard to do when you have a plethora of riches now after this past trade deadline in your farm system. It's something that, David Stearns gets paid what he gets paid to do this, and I don't envy his position because that would stress me out in terms of making these decisions. There's a lot of homework, a lot of research that needs to go in terms of making that decision of who you're going to let go and see walk on to another team versus who you're going to retain. And as soon as you decide one guy over the other, the guy who sticks around has that much pressure added onto him already playing in a New York market. So those are just the facts. So we'll monitor that situation with second base and third base. The DH situation, oh my goodness, I can't believe I put Daniel Vogelbach's name on here, but as of recent, he is still an internal option for the DH spot. Those are your three, in my eyes, three internal options for the New York Mets for the DH spot in 2024. Mark Vientos, Ronnie Mauricio can definitely be a DH hitter, and then Daniel Vogelbach. Funny enough, out of those three guys, I'd rather see Ronnie Mauricio in there than anybody else that's listed because I just do like what I see mechanically out of Ronnie Mauricio. Even though he does strike out a lot, his eye at the plate definitely is a question mark. His sheer power and bat speed is something that definitely makes me trust him more. And Daniel Vogelbach, I mean, I can't believe that's an even discussion of possibly retaining him after what he produced this past season. I just can't see it. I can't see it. But there are some other external options in free agency that the Mets can pursue for the DH spot. If Pete Alonso's situation plays out where the Mets retain him, great. Or if they go into the season with him having that 1 year left on his contract, going into free agency next season, is what it is. We'll see what happens in terms of his production. But you need a power bat behind Pete Alonso. You need to find a power bat to slot behind the polar bear, to protect the polar bear, to let the polar bear do what he does. Because it's a miracle that Pete Alonso even hits 30 plus home runs, let alone 40 with the protection that he has behind him, which is nothing. Um, I mean, Shohei Ohtani is Shohei Ohtani. You know that we're going to take him no matter if he's pitching or not. I'm always going to take Shohei Ohtani on this team. If Shohei Ohtani commits to the Mets, even if he's not pitching in 2024, I'm signing him all day long. I don't care. No questions, no discussions asked. But if that big fish in the pond, Shohei Ohtani, is not available, he chooses to stay on the West Coast. You got Jorge Soler, you got JD Martinez, Rhys Hoskins, Cody Bellinger. Jorge Soler is probably my 1B option. He's a tank. He hits missiles. He's been doing it consistently. And I think that he can be that power guy right behind the polar bear in that fifth spot in the lineup. JD Martinez had a great season with the Dodgers, a guy that everybody wanted the Mets to pursue last offseason, but they didn't. Rhys Hoskins coming off a major injury. I don't know if I trust Rhys Hoskins, to be honest with you. There are other guys that are not listed here. Cody Bellinger, so this is the deal. Cody Bellinger and Pete Alonso are both represented by Boras, and we know we know how the negotiations work with Boris. Like, I mean, he got Nimmo some extra money, and it's really you run a really high risk in terms of giving Cody Bellinger a long-term deal that he's going to be asking for, especially with Boris as his agent. He had a stellar year, a prove-it year with the Cubs. I understand that, but this is a guy who mightily struggled before that with the Dodgers. He really struggled after his MVP season. He wasn't himself. So I get that he has that accolade under his belt. I get that he's coming off of a great year in 2023, but giving him a long-term deal, anything more than 3 years for Cody Bellinger, anywhere he ends up, even if it's the Mets, I would say that's probably an overpay. Like, I am not comfortable going beyond 3 years. Um, and it's just the luck of the draw. We'll see what happens. We'll see if he's willing to take a 2 or 3 year deal, an extended prove it deal. But I really don't think that's not really how it usually pans out. So I would not expect Cody Bellinger to be a realistic target for the Mets. But you never know. Stranger things have happened. I really am just focusing my eyes on Jorge Soler, especially if Shohei Ohtani gets off the market and signs elsewhere. Jorge Soler is probably my 1B right there for the DH spot if they decide to go the free agent route on it, on that position. So let's talk a little bit Carlos Mendoza before we sign off here. Just wanted to sort of shed some light on my thoughts and opinions. I've already done so in my other podcast with the Mets, but I wanted to shed some light on this hiring because I just hate the narrative. I can't stand going on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it and seeing guys like John Harper and other beat reporters that cover the Mets or may not cover the Mets, and they're just sort of looking for clicks, just ridicule the Mets for this hiring. I just can't stand it. I get that he's a first year manager. He's been the bench coach for the Yankees for the past 4 seasons. He was an infield coach for 2 years with them before that. He was a minor league / independent league ball player for 13 seasons. I understand the question marks, but what I don't understand is that if you trust in David Stearns, like most fans were trusting in him when they wanted him to sign here before he inked the deal to become the Pobo of the Mets, why are you not going to trust the man when he has made it clear that this is the guy he wants here? Craig Counsell, as much as I talked about Craig Counsell and wanting Craig Counsell to sort of come back and be that pairing with David Stearns here in Queens, that looks like it was never going to happen. It looks like David Stearns knew it was never going to happen. And it looks like Craig Counsell just wanted to bait the Mets into inking the largest contract of any manager in the game of baseball right now with the Chicago Cubs. And David Stearns knew that. If you were a Mets fan and think that David Stearns didn't have those preliminary discussions and he didn't sign Carlos Mendoza before, not after, before the Craig Counsell signing was announced, you're sadly mistaken. They've done their research. They've done their due diligence on Carlos Mendoza, and they made it clear. They're basically indirectly screaming in everyone's faces that trust them. This is the guy. Now, whether he is or not, it remains to be seen. The jury's still out, but I'm not going to go ahead and grade or judge an entire offseason, especially before we've had any sort of trades or signings go down based off of a manager hiring. I'm not going to do it. So if you want to do that, more power to you. I'm not that sort of Mets fan. I will reserve my judgments until I see decisions being made. And I hope he gets it done. He knows what it's like to coach in New York. Um, and he's had players like Anthony Volpe and Harrison Bader raving about him. Brian Cashman, if you want to trust Brian Cashman's word or not, I don't know if I would, but he also had a really good high praise for Carlos Mendoza. So it's not like this guy doesn't have any sort of backing. Now, I understand first year manager. We've had Luis Rojas. We've had Mickey Callaway. I understand the skepticism and the criticism. I hear you loud and clear. I wasn't thrilled, but I wasn't, dogging this signing. This is strictly a signing where I'm going to be like, either he pans out and David Stearns is a genius and that's why we pay him the big bucks, or this is another managerial flop. But that judgment is not going to come right off the bat. I have to see how it plays out. And I think that's how people should approach this. But I'm not going to tell you how to fan, neither here nor there, any which way. Um, but the fact that the Mets made the hiring as soon as they did before the Craig Counsell signing was announced, and they could have lengthened that process out by a couple more weeks to interview a lot more candidates, and they chose not to. So that tells you what you need to know. Anyways, guys, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you tuning into the podcast. If you're watching this and if you made it this far, I appreciate you rocking with me. Thank you so much for listening to the True Mets Talk podcast. I will be dropping more solo Mets content as an addition to the group content that I do on the Interstate Mets Report and the Mets Roundtable podcast. So, like I said, another welcome to the True Mets Talk podcast. Make sure you're tuning in with me on X and Instagram as well as CPNY Sports. Hit that thumbs up for me. Hit that thumbs up, comment your thoughts and opinions, and subscribe to the channel in the bottom right-hand corner of this video. I appreciate the support. The channel has just surpassed 150 subscribers. I appreciate everybody rocking with me. Let's see how the hot stove heats up. Let's see how it plays out. And as always, guys, let's go Mets, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for watching the latest episode of the CP New York Sports Pod. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you hit that thumbs up, comment your thoughts and opinions, and use the lower right-hand button of this video to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.